Right now, somewhere in a hospital, a doctor is doing exactly two things at once: saving your life and accidentally destroying it. That's not a metaphor. Radiation therapy doesn't distinguish between a cancer cell and the healthy cell standing next to it. It just burns everything. That's the deal. You accept it because the alternative is worse. But it's still a deal. We've spent over 100 years and hundreds of billions of dollars on this problem. Smarter targeting, precision oncology, gene therapy, nanoparticles designed to find only the bad guys. And we've made real, genuine progress. We have. But here's the part nobody puts in the press release. We still can't protect the good cells while we're annihilating the bad ones. The artillery works. The collateral damage is still catastrophic. Meanwhile, there's an animal that's been solving this problem for 600 million years. It doesn't have a lab. It doesn't have a grant. It doesn't have a brain. It's less than 0.5 millimeter long. You've walked past it 1,000 times. It lives in the moss on your roof, in the gutter, in Antarctic ice, in the vacuum of outer space. That last one isn't a metaphor either. Its name is the tardigrade, and it can survive radiation doses that would kill a human being 1,000 times over. Today, we're going to find out why, and why what we found inside it might change cancer treatment forever. Let's talk about what radiation actually does. Not the sci-fi version, the real one. When radiation hits a living cell, it doesn't politely knock. It tears through your DNA like a bullet through paper. Biologists call it a double-strand break. Both sides of the helix snapped simultaneously. It's the cellular equivalent of cutting a rope in the middle of a performance. Your cells have repair mechanisms, good ones, actually, but radiation at therapeutic doses is designed to overwhelm those mechanisms. The point is to hit cancer cells so fast, so hard, they can't recover. The problem? Your healthy cells are in the same neighborhood, same bombardment, same wreckage. The result? A patient who survives cancer but ends up with heart damage, lung scarring, neurological problems, and sometimes cruelly secondary tumors years later caused by the original treatment. We call these side effects. That word is doing a lot of heavy lifting. The dream, the actual dream that keeps oncologists awake, is a shield. Something that makes healthy cells temporarily radiation resistant without granting that same protection to the cancer. We've tried. A drug called amifostine has done roughly this since the 1970s. It works, sort of. It also causes severe nausea, low blood pressure. Patients frequently refuse it. The treatment for the side effect has its own side effects. Welcome to modern medicine. Billions poured in. Biotech startups, university consortiums, Department of Defense contracts, and then someone looked at a tiny animal under a microscope, and everything changed. Meet Rhamazottius variornatus. You probably know it as the water bear, or the moss piglet. Neither name does it justice. This creature is 0.5 millimeter long, 8 stubby legs that look like they were designed by a committee that had never agreed on anything, a face that resembles a vacuum cleaner nozzle after a rough Tuesday. It does not care about your problems. Here's what this animal has survived in documented laboratory experiments. Temperatures close to absolute zero, temperatures above 150 degrees Celsius, the vacuum of outer space, actual outer space, no suit, no pressure, just raw void. radiation doses of 570,000 rems. For context, 500 rems kills a human being. 570,000 is not a typo. In 2007, NASA attached tardigrades to an open panel of the Photon M3 satellite. No protective shell, just these animals, mounted on a plate, orbiting Earth, completely exposed to the void of space for 10 days. They came back, they reproduced. The tardigrade's real superpower is not toughness. It's not endurance. It's not even survival instinct. The real superpower is architecture. When this animal senses lethal conditions approaching, it performs something far more radical. It disassembles itself deliberately on a molecular level. This state is called cryptobiosis. All metabolic activity drops to 0.01% of normal. Its body curls into a tiny sealed barrel called a ton. From the outside, it looks dead. By almost every biological definition, it is suspended. While inside this cryptobiotic state, the tardigrade expresses a protein that exists in no other animal on Earth. Scientists named it Dsup, short for damage suppressor. Dsup does not repair DNA after it has been damaged. That would already be impressive, but that's not what it does. Dsup wraps around the DNA before anything happens. It physically coats the double helix, a protein armor, a molecular bodyguard, a shield that sits between your genetic code and incoming radiation. Not recovery, not resistance, prevention. Think about that for a second. This animal, no brain, no lab, no research team, evolved a protein that physically blocks radiation damage. 600 million years of one brutal directive: survive or cease to exist. Dsup is what that directive looks like when it wins. In 2016, a team at the University of Tokyo did something that sounds either brilliant or mildly alarming. They isolated the gene that produces Dsup from the tardigrade genome. Then they inserted it into human cultured cells. Then they irradiated those cells. The cells expressing Dsup sustained 40% less DNA damage than normal human cells under identical radiation exposure. 40%. In oncology, a 10% improvement in outcomes is a landmark result. Papers get written, conferences get scheduled. A 40% reduction in radiation-induced DNA damage is not an incremental step forward. It's a different conversation entirely. It actively integrated with human chromatin, the structural scaffolding of human DNA. It behaved as though it was designed for human cells, as though it belonged there, as though 600 million years of tardigrade evolution was somehow quietly compatible with us. The implication: if you could temporarily express Dsup in a cancer patient's healthy cells during radiation therapy, you could potentially increase the radiation intensity hitting the tumor harder while the surrounding healthy tissue sits behind a molecular shield. The cancer cells don't receive Dsup. They weren't given the gene. They burn as before, possibly more. This is still research. The jump from human cells in a petri dish to a living patient involves 100 steps, each harder than the last. But the principle has been demonstrated in actual human cells, with a protein borrowed without asking from an animal that didn't know it was helping. Astronauts on long-duration missions to Mars accumulate radiation damage with no atmosphere to shield them. Nuclear industry workers, first responders to radiological events. The tardigrade didn't solve all of this. It handed us the blueprint. What we do with it is our problem now. Here's the thought that sits with me. This animal has been alive for 600 million years. It watched the mass extinction that ended the trilobites. It watched the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. It watched every catastrophe this planet has ever staged, every ice age, every volcanic winter, every radiation spike from a distant stellar event, and it just kept going. Not because it was smart, not because it planned, because it found exactly the right molecular trick once. We've been trying to solve radiation damage for a century. Expensive labs, brilliant minds, billions of dollars, and the answer was sitting in the moss on a parking garage roof. There's something genuinely humbling about that. Not discouraging, humbling, because nature has been running experiments for 3.8 billion years, and it doesn't throw away the results. Every organism alive today is a walking archive of solutions to problems you haven't thought of yet. We didn't invent biomimicry. We just finally started paying attention. We're not smarter than evolution. We just got here faster. And maybe the wisest thing we can do now that we're here is stop assuming we're the most creative engineers in the room and start asking what the moss piglet already figured out. If you want to keep discovering what nature solved while we weren't paying attention, there's a subscribe button somewhere on this screen. It's small, it's easy to miss. The tardigrade would have found it by now.